I don't want to say anything political. I realize it's divisive. So when I say something, I'm talking about the theories, is that when you don't hold people accountable in your culture, and I'm talking about work and socially, there are outcomes and consequences to not holding people accountable. And the inability to hold one person accountable is infectious. Now the society and culture is looking around going, oh, they're not going to hold us accountable for what we do. And that's when the lack of alignment occurs. So that is a universal lesson to us, that macro and micro is applicable, is your inability as a leader or a culture to hold people accountable, the consequences that can come from that.
Today on Leading with Integrity, we are talking agreements, accountability, and alignment with a returning guest. Long-time listeners and viewers may remember Jay Williams from way back in episode 20. So yeah, like 2.5, 3 years ago nearly. Last time he was on, we had a lovely conversation about the nature of communication and its role in leadership. Since then, he's continued his work in leadership. He is a founder, he is a speaker, he's a corporate behavioural strategist, and he's developed this A3 leadership approach. So we'll be talking about those 3 A's. We'll be talking about the power of adaptability, of emotional intelligence, how to give feedback well, the wider concepts around trust, respect, communication, and what all of these things look like in an effective approach to leadership, and the kind of organizational culture that it will build. Do listen to the end of the episode to hear more details about Jay and his work and how you can find out more about him, his website, etc. Or you can also just check the show notes. It's down there as well. And if you're listening or watching today because you are one of those new managers, you're new to leadership, new to management, you've maybe had a bad experience with a boss in the past, but you are determined not to become one of those cliche bad managers, then I'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. Again, the link is down there in the show notes. Or you can visit the website. It's leadingwithintegrity.co.uk. You can hit that green button on the homepage, sign up for the Integrity Leaders community. You'll get access to me and my time. We can have conversations about leadership anytime you like. You'll also be able to connect with other leaders and new managers. You'll be able to access learning, resources, training courses, all aimed at new leaders, first-time managers, people who want to be better than the last bad boss they had. So again, all of those links are down there in the show notes. The website's on the screen as well. So do pay us a visit today.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Jay, welcome back to Leading with Integrity. It's been a few years, but it's nice to have you on the show again.
It feels like yesterday. I think you looked at it and you said it's almost been 2.5 years.
Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun, I guess.
Yes, there's parts of it have been very, very fun. There's parts of it very fun. There's parts that have been fun. And there's been a few parts that don't check both the boxes, but yes.
Yeah, it's been an odd few years. I'll give you that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been, for me, it's been healthy in that it's challenged me personally, because I think the last few years, you can't be uncertain and unclear. I think, especially in your leadership style, that with all the uncertainty, which there definitely is, there has to be clarity in how you lead. And so I think the struggle for people is when they're uncertain and they're unclear, times are that they have to make sure that they're not uncertain and unclear. And so if I know for me personally, like you said, there's, being located in United States, there's been a lot, I think, people are making choices politically, identity choices, religious choices, and it just goes health choices. And so I think if you're in leadership at this point, you're not only navigating business, probably more so, you're navigating people and their emotions and their thinking and their feelings. And at some point, their performance, whatever order you put it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's always been true. It's just when, as you say, when times become a bit more uncertain, like politically or socially or economically or all three, it feels like in the last few years. It just becomes that much more important, doesn't it? Yeah.
I think it does. And, what's evolved for me since we last spoke is that I think it's Darwinism. By the way, if you hear anything clever, I'm not sure I came up with it. I probably heard it somewhere.
Same.
But this one, I remember where I heard it is, it's not going to be the strongest or the smartest that survive. I think during our times, I think it's the ones that have the ability to adapt. And it's adapting to the current circumstances based on the current resources. And so for the people and I want to be careful because I don't want to be insensitive to anyone's situation. So when I say this is that if you're complaining about the circumstances and the resources, that's not going to lead to the adaptability. It's making some acceptance that this is the current time. It's not permanent. It's how do we function in this time with this resource and come up with solutions based on that. And I think when I have conversations with leaders and we're working with teams, is that you can't have a conversation now if you're not talking about adaptability. And really, as you bring on people or as you grow people, is that you are having that conversation or at least coaching them on adaptability. I believe I want to be careful to say the number one thing, because if you listen to the podcast, it may change over time. But I think that's leadership, right?
Yeah.
Is evolving. I'd say right now, I want to say it's the number one conversation. The conversations that I'm having now really focus on agreements, accountability, and alignment, and adaptability. I like alliteration, David. That's
I spotted that. Yeah.
Yeah, you spotted that. Yeah. And I think part of it is that leadership is simple. People say it's simple, but it's hard. I think it's simple and hard, but negates the simplicity of it. I think when you get down to it, the concepts of leadership, like we just chatted about, are very simple. What's hard is in the moment when everything's hitting you at once to get back to the simplicity of it.
Yes.
Here's my keynote speech, David. You just
Lovely.
got
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. I mean, so before we get too much further, you've kind of hinted at some of this already, but for anyone who maybe didn't hear your last episode, however many years ago it was, do you want to just give a quick intro to who you are, what you do, why you do it, etc.?
So for my role is I'm a corporate behavioral strategist. So what I do is to help identify the behaviors that align with your values so that you can build agreements, have accountability, and ultimately alignment within your organization. And that's it. I've simplified my message. And the reason being is that more often than not, and I'm sure for the people listening and for you, is if we're engaged in a conversation, it's because there's not this alignment there. And by the way, when I say alignment, I'm not talking about consensus. I'm talking about direction, because quite often you may not have consensus. And as a CEO or a founder or president or leader, it's imperative that you have direction. Is that I ask, if there's not, tell me about your agreements. And more often than not, the conversation, well, here's the expectations we have. So we'll get back to that. I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question. So we'll get back to that part. So that's the cliffhanger. I'm a corporate behavioral strategist. That's the work that I do with organizations. And we focus on those three things: agreements versus expectations, accountability. And accountability, because when I was doing the research, around where's maybe the greatest pinch point as it relates to leadership. There's a study done, and what they found is that 82% of leaders have tried and failed to hold people accountable. So what it told me is that it's of interest to almost everyone, and it's also a need for everyone. And that was maybe the pinch point, is that people did have agreements. They didn't have the thinking, the skills, or the confidence to hold people accountable to those agreements. And that's what was causing the misalignment in the organization. If you had the agreements and the ability to hold people accountable to those agreements, you often found that alignment.
Mm. Yeah, accountability as a concept in leadership is very interesting to me, partly because of past experiences where it was severely lacking. But also, I think in the other direction as well, like leaders being accountable to their people to an extent. And I think there's a really interesting phenomenon there around like sort of toxic leadership as well, where they're just almost like sort of fingers in their ears and shouting at the top of their voice rather than being accountable for their words or their actions. But also like the perspective you have on it in the other direction, I can totally see that being one of the biggest sort of points of struggle and strife for a leader, especially if they are, as so many of us humans are, like avoiding conflict, not comfortable with change, difficult conversations, all of those kind of quite tense moments in business where there's money on the line and careers and livelihoods. So yeah, I'm rambling a bit, but I find the whole concept of accountability very interesting. And also, I agree with you, a lot of people struggle with it.
So in doing this work, and I want to simplify it, I think there's a lot of great leadership work out there. I don't think people want retreats. They want more results. They don't want workbooks. They want something that works right now. So really what I've done is try to reduce everything to its irreducible essence. And with agreements, accountability, backing up, is based on the fact what makes it easier, if that's where people want to go, is if you have agreements in place. And so I write about this in my book that I use the example, if you're listening and you have a credit card or you've purchased a car, you have a home, there's an agreement that you signed. And with that agreement, generally is if you don't make a payment within 30 days, they charge you $45. There's a late fee, something associated. And that's the agreement. This is what's going to happen. This is when it's going to happen. And this is the outcome to it. And if you don't pay within 30 days, they don't send you an email and go, oh, we expected you to pay because you signed the agreement. And after 60 days, it may be reported to credit or goes as late. They don't send you an email and go, wow, after the late fee and after the email, we had the expectation. And after 6 months, they don't say after the emails and after the late fees and after our phone calls, we had the expectation. Everything is written as we had an agreement. And so I think in the workplace, what's important is to say, do we have agreements? Where do we have agreements? Where do we have expectations? And I define expectation as something that you want that the other person either doesn't want to do or hasn't agreed to. And so generally it involves one person with expectations. An agreement has multiple parties. And so the question is have we gotten people to weigh in, to buy in on that agreement that we have in the workplace? And I think we do have agreements. So if people are wondering, well, do I have any? If you have a job description, that is your first agreement, is that you're going to show up, either you're going to work virtually, right? Or you're going to come into the office, or it's going to be a hybrid. We have an agreement that we're going to pay you this amount of money. We have agreement that you're going to provide these functions. So the next step, and this is a little nuanced pinch point. So I want to give people something tangible they can take away from this. And this is a pinch point in organizations, is I ask them, how many different job descriptions do you have? And you can imagine, David, most people, depending on the size of your organization, you have more than one. So whether you have 3 or you have 30 or 300, you have more job description and agreements than one. Then I ask them, how many evaluations do you have? And unequivocally, 99% of the time, people say I have one evaluation. So the next step in the agreement, the accountability portion, you have this generic form, hey, sign here, here, and here. And it doesn't address the specifics. And again, I go back to agreements with those three examples of your car, a credit card, and a home. How long are those agreements? They have each one. So an agreement provides clarity as well. And so before we get to accountability, I want to talk about some of the details of the agreements. That's the clarity portion of it. So when you hold people accountable, there's no ambiguity there. They know where the 30 days start. They know what the amount of the outcome is, right? So the next step is, what if we tailored our evaluations to the job description? Because I want to if accountability is the pinch point for people, how do we make that easier? So for those of you who are listening, I think that there's a leadership intelligence. So if you looked at the equation, it's AI plus IQ. So AI being artificial intelligence, IQ being your intellectual quotient, and EI being your emotional intelligence equals LI, your leadership intelligence. And so I'm interjecting AI now because I think it can become a collaborator with you. It's a source, not the source. And so with clients, I say, let's take your job description, let's put it in AI and ask them to develop an evaluation that's specific to their job role. So do that first. Then once you get that, ask them, and now be a behavioralist. This is where it comes in. Ask them, give me 4 behaviors that can evaluate the performance so that we have an agreement on what their performance looks like. And it does that. And then I ask, put a scale of 1 to 4 with complete clarity, which each score represents in the evaluation. So by the way, everything I'm doing as quickly as we're doing it, everybody who works with AI know it comes up this quickly. Now, I will share with you one of where I focus, to oversimplify it, there's a product, process, and people and business. I mean, I'm sure somebody would have a different alliteration maybe, David, but we'll go with that one. The people are the wild card. And so that's where the emotional intelligence comes in. And so in the evaluation, I ask them, use the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence, being self-aware, self-regulation, socially aware, relationship management, and include that in the evaluation with 4 behaviors under each. David, this is all done in 60 seconds. So now we have the agreement based on their job description. We now have a tool for an accountability that provides the additional clarity. So now when you're sitting down with someone to hire them, you're going to say, here's the agreement, and here's the tool we're going to use for accountability. I'm making this very easy. There's not going to be any conflict there. This mirrors the agreement with your car, your credit card, and your home. And by the way, if you asked anybody, how do you feel when you get a new credit card? Usually feel like I'm real excited. How do you feel when you get a new car? I'm really, really excited. How do you feel when you're buying your new home? And when I looked at it, it's when that agreement was made, is when everything was good. It was when you were excited. And so that's where the parallels come in. Do it when you hire people. They're signing everything, sure. That way, when that excitement wanes or something changes, nothing's changing the agreement for you. And as a leader and as this company where you're evaluating performance, these financial companies, whatever's going on in your life, they can't factor in that. They still have a performance that they have to meet, right? With collection rates and profitability and things like that. I'm not taking the human side out of it. I just want to show you how the accountability can become easier, not easier. So now when you're sitting down on a review, you just hand it to them and you say, you know what, I'd love for you to fill this out. You know, tell me where you see yourself. When they come and sit with you, you ask them, where do you think your peers would say you are? How would they score you? What would your clients score you? What do you think my perception is? So there is a method of coaching in this that's a Socratic method of using questions. And what I found with leaders is they go, this makes it so easy, because with reviews, I felt like I was kind of showing up and throwing up on them. I didn't know what to say. I had very generic questions. And so if you're listening, this would be a tactical way to execute this conversation, is to look at your job descriptions and do they fully encompass the agreements you want to have? If not, you can fill that in, run it through AI, and develop the evaluation. So if you have 5 different roles in your organization, you're going to have 5 different evaluations, 5 different agreements, just like there's a different agreement for your credit card than there is for your car, than there is for your home. And when you have to have the conversation now, it's really referring to the performance. So you say in the agreement was the day started at 10 a.m., 9 a.m., 7:45 a.m. Where would you say you are as far as your attendance to this point? And again, now I'm checking on their self-awareness, some of those things, right, with the questions. And so that makes the accountability conversation easier. And then you can ask them, they say, well, I've been late 3 times last month. I'd ask, well, what is your understanding of our agreement as it relates to timeliness? Well, you get written up after 1 time, and, the second time is your final warning. And to your recollection, where do you see us at? We're at the 3rd time. So based on our agreement, what do you think the outcome should be? And you can say consequence. Words carry weight. And so I've been very careful. Some people see it as a negative connotation to it. So if you want to say outcome, in agreements, in that same scenario I gave you with the credit card and the car and the home, if you pay on time, there is an outcome. You get preferred credit rates, maybe lower interest rates, a higher credit score. So you could call that a consequence. We don't see it that way. We see it as an outcome. So let me just pause there. I feel like I just hijacked the conversation. I just give you an example. If you don't have clarity in your agreements and you don't have the ability to hold people accountable, that's where there becomes this misalignment and this lack of direction, or people going different directions. So I'll pause there, David.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying about the word consequence. It definitely has a negative meaning in most cases, doesn't it? When actually, like, the literal meaning is just the result of an action.
Yeah.
Right? Or inaction, I suppose.
Yes. If you think of a better word, let me know.
Yeah. No, outcome fits. Outcome makes sense to me, and it feels a bit less negative connotation as well. And I mean, the other point on the meanings of words and things, I think that difference there between agreements and expectations is actually quite important. It sounds like semantics, but it's really not, because agreement implies, agreement, like both people have the same understanding and they've come to a position together, whereas expectations, as you say, can be very one-sided. Like the other party in that situation may have no idea that expectation existed if you never told them, if you never came to that agreement. And I think that's a really important nugget of lesson there for leaders. There's a whole thing around expectations management in leadership and having these certain conversations like this early on, which so many of us, I know I've done this in the past, you don't do it for whatever reason. And then later on, 6 months, 2 years, whatever, you try and call somebody out on something, hold them accountable on it, and they say, well, I didn't realize I was meant to be doing this. Why didn't you tell me?
Yeah, it's when you bring this up. So I was working with someone 2 weeks ago, and they said, Jay, it sounds like we could eliminate expectations from our vocabulary at work. And I'm sure, like you, I learned so much from my clients. I'm sure it's because there's a different perspective. And I never thought of that. And they said, I want to think about it. I said, as I think about it, tell me what your take would be if I asked you the same question. They say, I don't know that there's a need for expectations in our vocabulary, because if we sit in a meeting, and you just gave a great example, David, is at the end of the meeting, if you said, okay, what are our agreements before we leave here? Like, what are we going to do and who's going to do it and when is it going to be done? And the event that you can't do it, what should the agreement be? And the event that you don't do it, understanding that other people are relying on your contribution to this process. And so as a leader, you can lead with asking questions. It's what you ask, not what you say. You get people to weigh in, and you kind of checked all these boxes, and where they weigh in, they buy in, because ultimately you want commitment, not compliance. Meaning they do it because they want to, not because they have to. That being said, as a leader, you're not always going to get consensus. I was on a call with a CEO and he has leadership team last week. And he said, Jay, I know I don't have consensus on this. We'd had an agreement. All right. I said, remember what our agreement was about alignment is that it's not about consensus. It's about direction. As a CEO, your role is to provide direction for them and make sure your leadership team, make sure everyone's following in that direction. So what you said was a great example. And I feel as though if you look at your vocabulary that you're using, agreements carry weight, because now when you go back, it's not what was our expectation that we talked about, it's what was the agreement that we had. And again, I'm going to go back to where agreements have been successful. And I'm using these three examples. I'm sure there is never a time that your credit card company uses, we had an expectation. It's at the top of it. The paperwork, it says agreement. It does not say, and your mortgage, those people, your line of credit people aren't using that vocabulary. So I think as a leader, there's an evolution of your vocabulary that goes along with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know enough about the law in the States, but certainly in the UK, legally an agreement is enforceable, whereas an expectation is not. So that's probably why the finance companies use that word, right?
Yeah, well, we're having a struggle because even some of our agreements aren't being enforced. But yes, in theory, what you said is absolutely.
I mean, there's a base legal principle, if not a practical reality.
Yes.
But I think there's a lesson there as well, isn't there, about the language again? That has meaning.
Well, here's the other part that I would say, and we kind of tongue in cheek, or I don't want to say anything political. I realize it's divisive. So when I say something, I'm talking about the theories. Is that when you don't hold people accountable in your culture, and I'm talking about work and socially, there are outcomes and consequences to not holding people accountable. And the inability to hold one person accountable is infectious. Now the society and culture is looking around going, oh, they're not going to hold us accountable for what we do. And that's when the lack of alignment occurs. So that is a universal lesson to us that macro and micro is applicable, is your inability as a leader or a culture to hold people accountable, the consequences that can come from that. That was not a political statement. That was a leadership.
No,
David?
I understand why you feel you need to caveat that.
Okay.
I get it.
Yes.
But I don't think we need to take it to a political or social or national level at all. I think if we think about it in terms of the average business, if such a thing exists, a business, a team, an organization, like the impact there of a culture that doesn't have accountability. I mean, it's no exaggeration to say that kills businesses. I mean, I've seen it do that. I'm sure you have as well. Because ultimately, and as you say, you only have to do it with one person. It becomes infectious. Like as soon as someone else finds out that one person wasn't held accountable, they think, right, well, in that case, I don't have to do this either, or not do this, whatever example we're using. And then suddenly nobody feels like they really have to do their job because there's no consequence if they don't.
Well, you're a project manager. I mean, that's your area of expertise, right?
Yeah.
So you are now, leading a team that I did some work for an engineering group, and my youngest son is an engineer. So when he came out of school, he was a project manager. He was the youngest in the room. And he's the lowest on the totem pole, yet he was held accountable for the results, right?
Yeah.
And so what you just articulated is that I developed this program, Leading Without Leverage, because they didn't have the title, right? So how could they conversationally hold people accountable? And in a group like that, where you have no leverage, and you can relate to this, if somebody says they're going to get you information and data, that other people are relying on in the team to meet their goals, and they don't do it, and now you're supposed to have it Thursday by 2 and you don't hold them accountable, then the other people are like, yeah, if I get to it, yeah, to the best of my ability, I'll try to do that. But if I don't, what I'm hearing and seeing is I'm not going to lose my job. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it. That is what's going on in your culture. And that could apply to dress code. It could apply to language that you use. It could apply your interaction with clients, preparation. Meetings, too. There's people who tell me, yeah, we have meetings, but everyone doesn't show up. Well, at some level, you must not have held someone accountable with an outcome if you don't show up. And I go back to engineering. I've done a lot of work recently there. And I even heard from my son, yeah, we'll have a meeting and there's all these attendees. They say they're going to attend and then 3 or 4 of them don't show up. Somewhere along the line, either there wasn't the agreement, and if there was the agreement, people weren't held accountable.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, first of all, you've just like perfectly described one of the biggest challenges of project management, in my experience anyway. I think that accountability point is there, definitely. There's also the culture has an impact, but as well as that, there's particularly for the project manager who usually, like at best, they'll be sitting in the middle of whatever that org chart is. And even for the specific project, they don't have what we would traditionally think of in terms of like authority or power or control over the team. They're there largely as like a facilitator, a communicator, keep an eye on what's going on, write the reports, keep the charts, run the meetings, that sort of thing. So they if they're good at their job, they have the power of influence, but they don't necessarily have like that direct ability to hold people accountable beyond like a verbal sort of put them on the spot, or I don't want to say embarrass them in front of others, but you can certainly call out behavior in a terms of like, well, and what impact do you think that's going to have on the project because you didn't meet that obligation, that agreement that we had. But it is very difficult. You do need that leadership support from higher up the chain of the project, if that makes sense. And I think I'm saying that deliberately because there is a commonality with team leadership as well. Because if you are that sort of middle manager, in a lot of organizations, unless you're in like a big company and you're really well trusted, or you're in a small one and you're the CEO or whatever, you don't have that control, that ability to hold people accountable to the ultimate account, if you like. So you can only go so far, I guess is what I'm saying, because there will always come a point where someone will be like, what are you going to do, fire me?
Well, let's talk about that because I want to make sure.
I am playing devil's advocate just a little bit.
Horns popping up.
Yeah.
By the way, I love this because it kind of replaces role play, right? It's kind of like real play. And I think for the listeners, this can't be theory. It has to have this applicability. So actually, I'm grateful for you doing this. And this is common that comes up. And like I say, I heard it from my son, but I hear it from new people into organizations. They go, I have no leverage here. I'm the lowest person on the totem pole. In a lot of cases, I'm the youngest, and there's senior people with more experience making more money than me. What I want, so there's something else I focus on. This is a separate conversation. So let me hit pause and then I'll bounce right back. I talk about MIQ versus MIS, most important question versus most important statement. And in your approach and your communication is that you're really taking every statement and putting it into a question. So if the statement is you need to have this by a certain time, I can't hold you accountable. That's what you say. Most important statement. Most important question is how do you take what you're thinking, which is I don't have the ability to hold you accountable from you're going to lose your job standpoint, and put it into a question. And so for someone who's new or in that role, I would ask the group, I'd say, hey, we have about 10 minutes left. And so I want to talk about accountability. And I just want to go around the room and ask you, how can I hold you accountable to the agreements that were made? And the reason I ask you is that somebody's going to hold me accountable And that's important to me. So if I could just go around the room here, and you've committed to have this information to me by Wednesdays at 2:00. In the event you're not going to have it to me on time, what agreement can we have there? And in the event it's not here, knowing that the person 3 over from you is going to rely on that and then come back to me, how can I hold you accountable in a way that acknowledges your role and your position and that you find professional and respectful? That's a lot of words. I coach people specifically, if you're a young person, just put your head down, pretend you're writing on the pad and say it. So if I said, "Hey, David, I'm looking at what you said. I'm looking at everyone's agreements here. In the event that you can't have this Tuesdays by 2, how can I hold you accountable?" And I'm going to ask everyone the same question to make sure that this project runs smoothly. You can do that as well. So I want to have those conversations with those people so that stylistically, it's not putting the other person on the defensive. It's bringing up the conversation so that we can form an agreement. So now I come back to you and I said, "Hey, David, I just, in the meeting, we'd spent the last 10 minutes and we talked about accountability and me holding you accountable." And hopefully someone will say, and if it's a big burly guy or, a guy, woman, whoever it is that maybe is contentious, whatever it is, that you have an agreement ahead of time. And if that person's 6'2" and bigger or intimidating and you're new to the job and you're intimidated, you could go to them and just said, "Hey, you gave me permission that if this report wasn't done by 2 to come to you and to have that conversation." Now it's easier because I'm just, as a great leader, whether you have it by title or not, your job is not to make decisions for people and to determine the outcomes. Those things have already been established. That person's making the decision on whether they're going to act on the agreements they made and how they're going to act. That's already been made. My role as a leader and even as a project manager is to hold you accountable to the agreements and outcomes that you've already agreed to. I want to shift people's thinking, David, because now when you go in, this is all about accountability, guys, about agreements, accountability, and alignment on this project. So I'm going to ask you, as the youngest person in the room, as the lowest person on the totem pole, and the person's going to be held accountable. How do I hold you accountable? And how do I hold your peers so that we have an alignment in the project? That's different language, but that's not but. And that's language that anybody can deliver at any level. So let me pause there, play the devil's advocate, poke holes in that, because I really want people who listen. I don't want them to be inspired or motivated. I want them this is transformational. This is something I can execute on.
Yeah. I think, so pulling back from being devil's advocate just a little bit, I think I would, in the interest of fairness, in my experience, the vast majority of occasions in project teams, leading teams, working with colleagues, I've been very fortunate in my career, I think, because I've never had to have that really contentious moment in these things where somebody has just not even tried to do something. Maybe so like once or twice, right?
I don't think it's luck. Let me interrupt you.
Well,
I don't think that's luck. I know you a little bit, and I think there's a very specific reason. So what would you attribute that quote unquote luck to for you?
Some of that was within my control because there were teams that I directly had hired. So, maybe I was lucky, maybe I was a good judge of character when we took them on, maybe a combination. But then there's also been times where I've not had any say in who's in the project team. So, that was luck. Like there's no way I could have impacted that before the team formed.
You really think it was luck? It had nothing to do with your demeanor, your approach,
maybe
your emotion.
Maybe my demeanor
luck.
I think when on the couple of occasions where something did go wrong and it maybe didn't resolve in the way it could or should have, that probably wasn't luck. That was because of I was in a very different mental state at that point in my career. I probably didn't handle the situation very well. I didn't ask the right questions. I didn't say the right things.
Oh, I thought you said it's gone well for you.
Yeah. So on the 2 occasions where it didn't, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't luck. It probably was me.
Oh, okay. It's what the listeners to really take away, that And I know you briefly just from hearing you and from the work you've done. I think that there are things that you intentionally do that heavily weight the outcome. And that's what I want the listeners to get is that when you can't, what you can control is maybe not the situation of the person, you can control how you respond to it. So I put you on the spot because I think that's who you are. So go ahead. I'm playing the devil.
I think one of the things is always, it's sort of what you've already said anyway. It's leading with that curiosity, asking the questions, being as approachable as you can. But also, I think what I've always found really, I don't know, I don't have direct data or evidence. I just have like anecdotal experience. But what's always helped me is offering that hand of support, trying to meet people in the middle, meet them where they are as well if you can, understand what their conflicting priorities and needs are in whether you're in a project setting, whether you're leading a team over a long period, whatever that, even if you're just like a colleague and you want to work better as a team. I've always found that elicits the kind of response where you never even have to worry about accountability because they're immediately bought in because you've tried to help and support them. You've shown them trust and respect. They reciprocate. They don't want to leave you hanging. Now, there have been a couple of exceptions in my career where that's not worked, which we've already talked about. But by and large, that has been my experience.
That's a people dynamic.
There were other things going on in the when it went wrong. Definitely, there were bigger concerns at an organizational level, which definitely had an impact.
There's three things you mentioned. Well, I think you have some nuggets here that I hope the listeners are gleaming as you say them. Is that you mentioned trust and you mentioned respect. And Amy Cuddy, she wrote this book, Presence. She's a Harvard professor, I believe. Really interesting book. One of the things in the book she talked about is she'd done this global research for the book, and she found there's two things that everybody looks for globally: trust and respect in a relationship. So you just hit, if you're dealing with people, the two things that you want to focus on. And I've experienced that with you as well. And so the other thing that you mentioned, if somebody was listening to you, is that the most effective communicators communicate from the other person's perspective. And you said, I want to understand what they're going through. I want them to sense that there's buy-in and there's collaboration here. And I think if people were listening to you, those would be the three things is one, where is my trust with the people I'm interacting with? Where's their trust with me? Where's the level of respect? And respect, by the way, not just verbally how you communicate. Are you respecting deadlines? Are you respecting appointments? Are you respecting commitments? And to your point, in most cases, you said there's exceptions, which is a human dynamic. People will reciprocate what the respect that you show to them. And then the third thing is that before I even start the conversations, and that's why I ask questions. I want to know what you know. I want to know what you think, and I want to know what you feel before I respond. And you demonstrated that because now I can communicate from your perspective. So I thought that was brilliantly laid out, and I hope the listeners took those little nuggets from what you said.
Thank you. It was a bit off the cuff, but
You're good. You can do improv comedy and improv leadership. That's great.
Yeah, I'll stick to leadership, I think. I don't fancy my chances in comedy.
There's only one way to find out, David.
Maybe that could be a retirement project.
Mine's been nonprofit, unfortunately. But yes, I do try comedy every now and then.
Yeah. In thinking back to our first conversation, that last episode we did, I remember we spent a fair amount of time talking about like the communication side of things. And we even had a bit of back and forth, I think, about whether the words leadership and communication could be interchangeable. I remember that being quite an interesting one. So if we look at what you do today and what we've learned since that last conversation, I think there is a common thread here in terms of that communication piece, as we've just discussed. I think there is something around, and we've sort of talked about it a little bit already, but if we were to think about those moments of communication that most leaders and most managers find the hardest, high up that list has to be giving effective feedback, giving it in a way that's useful, productive, effective. So what would be like your top piece of advice for someone who is struggling with that? What can you offer them?
Nothing. Can you ask me another question, David? I've got no. Here's for feedback specifically. I think it starts with redefining your definition of feedback, how you think and feel about it. And if I offered this, I'm going to try to answer very succinctly. This is a definition I found for myself that I share that's been very helpful, is that feedback is simply information and data to improve my performance for that person. And the reason I said that person is I could talk to you and you say, you know what, Jay, you hijacked the podcast. You really talk too much, right?
Definitely
I
not
could
the
talk
case.
with not the case. Okay. I could talk to someone else and they could say, you know, I really loved how you carried the conversation because I really don't want to talk on these podcasts. I want the other person to do it. What I want to help people with is that feedback's just information and data to improve your performance for that person. By the way, which person was right? The person who said I spoke the right amount or the person that said I spoke too much? If you can remove the judgment of the feedback, it gives you additional clarity. So in an organization, if you become to be an organization that you can redefine feedback and people view it in this, it's just information data to improve my performance. For me, I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying for me, that the biggest struggle people have is that, well, is it good feedback or bad feedback, right? Let's eliminate that. So that's one, if you could redefine it. Two, if you, in the studies support this data overwhelmingly about cultures that are the strongest are the ones that first and foremost are a culture of asking for feedback and focus on that. And secondarily, giving feedback. Not that they're not important. You have a culture where I'm coming to you and I said, hey, David, you know, we're in this meeting and I just want to get some feedback from you. And so and it's important with feedback that you're very specific. I wouldn't say, David, how did I do? I just say, David, I'd just like some feedback on my preparation. How prepared did you feel I was as it related to this meeting, what you said the objective was? Imagine if you have a culture. Now, if you tell me, Jay, you did a good job, here's my question for you. Is that feedback or is that a compliment?
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on the question, doesn't it? If that's the response you get to a specific query, then I guess it's just a compliment and it's maybe avoiding the question. But then if you'd asked your other version of the question that's more vague, then it could be either or both, I suppose.
Well,
vague question elicits a vague response, doesn't it?
That, if people are taking notes today, I don't think they're going to take notes on what I say, David. I think simply what you say is if you ask a vague question. So you said, how'd the project go? The person said, it went good. It went well. It didn't
Fine.
go right. So that's a differentiator. And people say that, you know, my boss told, what was the feedback you got? My boss told me I did a good job. Remember our definition. It's information and data to improve your performance. If you told me, Jay, you did good in your preparation, is that a compliment or feedback? Based on our definition, there's no information and data to improve my performance. So if you said, Jay, I think you did really well. Here's what I loved is I said, I need some analytics, some tangible data. And you brought me 3 examples of a small, mid-sized, and large organization. Now I have information and data so that next time I come to the meeting, I should do that. That's what I did well. I can replicate that behavior. In the same token, if, you know, we had a meeting and I said, you know, how did I do as far as my communication style with the team? And you go, well, Jay, it could have been better. Is that feedback or is that constructive, I guess, constructive criticism, whatever you want to call it, or is it negative? Is it feedback? If you told me it could have been better, there's no information or data. If I said, how they do is it related to communicating with the team? And you said, Jay, here's what I liked. You were obviously prepared. Where I think there's an opportunity is to shift the dynamic And so let me ask you about this dynamic. Who do you think did most of the speaking in the meeting, Jay? Again, I'm going to go back to questions all the time.
Yeah.
And they go, well, I think I did. You'd say, well, Jay, what do you think the percentage was? I go, I don't know, probably 80-20. What do you think a ideal meeting is, or what are the best meetings that you've been participated in? What's the dynamic been? Where the group does most of the talking. That would be an example of coaching. That would be an example of feedback, information, and data. Otherwise, if you sit in a company meeting or a project meeting, they said, David, you did a horrible job with that project. Never happened. Hypothetical. Is that a critique? Is that a complaint? This company, they never get things right. This company's not organized. Is that a complaint or is that feedback?
Or is it just avoiding accountability?
It's not feedback. Yeah. Those other two things. So when someone says that, that's why when people say, well, how do I do this? I don't want to have team meetings because I'm afraid that the feedback's going to be negative. Feedback's information and data. So someone says this company always getting wrong. You just so the agreement of the meeting is that I want feedback from you. I'm not looking for complaints. I'm not looking for compliments. So what is it, Jay, that you think the company could do better at? And so leaders now, it's not confrontational, it's not conflict, it's just a conversation. However, you have to have an agreement in the beginning. This is about feedback. You need the clarity in the agreement that feedback is defined as information and data. So if you say you don't like something, that's not feedback. If you say what we can do to make it better, that's feedback. If you say I'm doing a good job as a leader, that's a compliment. I want feedback. What is it? David, you're a great listener. David, you ask great questions. You consider a perspective other than your own. You're always on time. You honor your commitments. You now have information and data to be an effective leader for them.
Yeah, again, I feel like this is a cultural thing, isn't it, in organizations, and whether you have that sort of kind of culture, kind of relationships between people in your business or team or whatever, where they feel like confident and safe enough to offer actual feedback. So they don't feel like they've got to be sycophantic and only give you compliments. They're not afraid to say the negative things either, or they're not afraid of recriminations if it's perceived as negative. And the fact as well that in the other direction, people feel safe and confident enough to ask for feedback too. So I'm sure we've all worked in companies where the management, let's call them, never asked for feedback because they were afraid of the answers, which the implication is they already know what the answer is and they know it's bad.
Yeah, what if the answer's not bad? You not liking it doesn't make it bad. If you say that leaders listen, you just don't like that answer. It's still information and data to help you. They look at financial reports, they look at customer trends, and the information they may not like, it's still interesting and useful to them. You just mentioned something which is really a hot topic now, psychological workplace safety. First of all, we don't have societal psychological safety. So people are hesitant to do that, and they haven't built the trust in the culture that it's okay. Now, it's how you say it and when you say it and what you say. So I want you to realize that. So if somebody in the meeting says, you suck as a leader and this company's horrible, and there's some repercussions that they understand is that we have a value of respect in the organization. So how respectful was it to share something with the group that you didn't share with me first? And how would you feel if I shared something? How respectful would that be? And so that's where your values come in, is that you can share those. However, your point is well taken. So this was 2 years ago. I was fired by a client that I worked with for 4 years consecutively on a regular basis, a week by week basis. And they had asked for feedback, and there were 4 people on the call. And I shared the feedback. The next day I got the call. They said, Jay, sounds like you're moving on to bigger things and we're probably not a match for you. The next day.
Oof.
And what message is, they loved me before, they were talking about how great, and here's what the next few years look like. And the next day I said something that wasn't what they liked. It wasn't that it wasn't true. They didn't like it. And, and the organization has a high level of turnover because of that. The leader in the organization, when they hear things they don't like, there's a quick exodus after that. And so to your point, as a leader, the question is do I provide the psychological workplace safety that you can voice it? There has to be agreements in how you voice things. Because for the person who said the negative or the less than positive things in a group setting, that wasn't the issue. It wasn't what you said. It was more so how you said it and when you said it. And that's around communication and leadership and communication. It still boils down to what you say, how you say it, and when you say it. And people have oftentimes in a all hands meeting said things. And it wasn't what you said. That was okay. I want you to be truthful, honest, open, honest, and on time. It wasn't how you said it. It's when you said it. Is that you brought something to my attention in front of the team without bringing it to my attention. So in the future, if you bring it to my attention, I just don't want to be, no leader likes to be surprised. I've never met one. In fact, I've heard the opposite. They said, just never surprise me. So if you have something to say, you're going to bring it up in the meeting, give me a heads up. Hey, we aren't going to hit the target day. We're not hitting the financial numbers. I just don't want to be surprised in me. Also, there's leaders that they have enough trust in the organization that it's okay. You just need to understand your culture and where the trust is in psychological workplace safety.
Yeah, definitely. There's a certain part of me is like, well, why ask the question if you're going to react that way to the answer?
I wonder that all the time. And the reason is because they want to hear something else. So it's not that they want to hear the truth. There's something very specific. And when you ask a question, how open are you to the range of responses? And if you realize that that's a tight range, I can't hear anything more negative now. I'm going through some things personally. We're going through struggles with the VC. Then as a leader, I wouldn't ask that question or make sure your question is very specific. I just need to hear some good news now. What's something that's good news that you can share with me that I can share back with the team and the board? That's the MIQ. What's the most important question I can ask in this moment? That's where your emotional intelligence. So that's when I talk about AI and I talk about IQ and I talk about EI. This leadership intelligence incorporates the three. I wouldn't minimize AI. I wouldn't minimize IQ, and I wouldn't minimize your emotional intelligence. It's a combination of the three, though. And if you're getting by with the three, that other one's going to show up at some point.
Yeah. And I mean, at that point about leaders not liking surprises, I don't know. I think I've never known a leader to like a bad surprise, definitely.
Well, when you talk about surprise, is it a Pearl Harbor surprise or is it a birthday surprise, right? Two different things. So I would, to your point, I don't think they like the Pearl Harbor surprise. They love the birthday surprise. I just think you need to have agreements ahead of time. And so as you talk with your leadership team or your people, if you're working on a project, and even if you're a new project manager like you articulated or senior, is, just tell them that, my experience is that people love good surprises. If we're going to have Fridays off or we're going out for drinks, surprise, they love that. What they don't like is that we have scope creep. What they don't like is that we're going over budget. And so you need to define those things. I've worked with organizations where their chief compliance officer brings up something in front of the board. And the CEO was like, I didn't know that. And now I'm finding out in front of the board. So I think it's important in your culture as a leader to say, listen, I'm open to things coming up in the moment. It's how and when these surprises, what the outcome's going to be, I may want to experience a little bit differently.
Yeah. So it's an interesting area. I don't want to say there's some red flags in there for me, but I do think...
Throw them out there, please.
I think... So we've talked about like the psychological safety aspect of it. We talked as well about the trust and respect pieces earlier. So to me, all three of those maybe not depend on, but they certainly work a lot better if you're in that sort of organization where there's a relatively open, transparent culture. So when you hear leaders say to you something like, I don't want you to say something in a meeting that you haven't said to me first, that to me is maybe an orange flag, a slight red flag about they're taking a more of a controlling stance, which is more management than it is leadership. And I think that difference is quite important, because if you want to build that sort of open, honest, transparent culture, then you can't be also trying to control the release of information, unless it is something where there's like a protection issue or a confidentiality requirement, or it's about a staff's personal problems or whatever, something like that. But for the most part, I mean, things like the performance of the business, you shouldn't be afraid of sharing that with your team. If you are, why are you? If you're not already aware of something like that before you go into a meeting about it, then are you really that paying attention as a manager, if not as a leader? I don't know. It raises questions for me, is what I'm saying.
I think this is where emotional intelligence as a leader comes in. So if we talk about the four components, there's self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, and relationship management. So self-awareness would be being aware that you don't like surprises and how you respond to them. And so you might share that with the team, is that I'm working on it. I would just say historically for myself, I realize that I'm predisposed to want things a very particular way. I like to know what's going to happen before it's going to happen. And the reason is that I need time to process. There are people who process out loud, and so they don't mind. Throw it out. Let's talk about it. And there's other people that process internally. And so I think that's where it's important to understand that about yourself. And so the regulation maybe is, hey, if it's going to be something that I'm going to need time to process, or I want to massage knowing our culture, how we position things based on my last experiences. The other thing is everybody's bringing their own experiences. So when you get into the workforce and you hire someone, even if they're 23 years old, they've had 23 years of. And so they go, no, I'm not sharing any feedback, because when I did that growing up, I was on the other end of a backhand, or I got shut down. I got sent to my room. Other people like, no, and the culture has in, you said whatever's on your mind. People yelled and screamed. You sat down, you had dinner, and you hugged each other and laughed. You watched the TV show. So now they come into this culture with that mindset, and they're shocked that someone would shut them down. That's where it's important. Again, you have the product and the process, which AI is really nailing, because there's not as many variables, or they're known. Humanity continues to throw these different variables to us, right? And so as a leader, to be self-aware, to be socially aware. So as an example, to your point, if I don't like surprises and I want to know everything and it's about a control thing, what message is that sending to my team? Do I want them to replicate that behavior? Or do I ask myself, what would give me a comfort level in hearing information in a group setting? And maybe it has to do with who's in the room. There's certain people that we were peers at one time. I've moved up in the organization, which is another dynamic also in small to mid-sized companies. People I used to hang out with, and maybe on the weekends we went out, now report into me, and I need to have a separation, or they haven't made the separation, or they don't think I should have gotten the role. These are all things that, if you're listening, when I say, I want to be careful here, because as a leader, you may need someone that you have one-to-one conversations with, that you feel psychological workplace safety with the two of you, and that you can share what's on your mind. And, they can ask you, is your ability to have information shared with you first and not the group, where does that work for you? Where does that work against you? in a situation where there were no consequences, how would you feel about everybody sharing things real time? And they go, listen, if my people who now report into me that we were peers wouldn't judge me, they wouldn't think less of me. They would give me time to process. They wouldn't start pointing fingers. I would feel different. So there is a conversation. And that's really one of the chapters in the book is conversation versus confrontation. I believe everything can be a conversation. It has to do with you trusting people and there being a clear definition and agreement around trust. And by the way, when I'm talking about trust, I'm talking about character and competence. So intent and integrity, capability and results, and that there's a mutual respect there. So I'll pause there. You bring up a great point for anyone listening. I'm glad you did, because I want you to go back in your organization. And this is not my words. This is Stephen Covey. He wrote the book, Speed of Trust. Great, great book. Absolutely recommend it to everyone. I use it as a filter for my communications. He said there's an equation. The higher the level of trust, the higher the speed in which things happen. And you've seen in organizations where someone says, you just got to trust me. And people, okay, good. We're good. Don't agree, but I trust you. Character and competence, right? So the higher the level of trust, the higher the speed. And you've seen in organizations, people go, you just got to trust me or on a project. People go, no, I saw your last project and I saw what you did before. Lower trust, lower speed. So I think you bring up great points. And in our conversation, that's the human dynamic. There's always going to be this variable. So I hope our conversation is really a conversation starter for people.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't disagree with anything you've said. You're absolutely right. I think it's that question of scale, isn't it? The speed of trust, but the scale of trust as well, like how long you've worked together, what past patterns there are, how well you know each other as well. It's all kind of interwoven. But I've certainly seen both ends of that scale. I mean, there was one organization I worked for where whenever somebody would say the words, you've just got to trust me, it was because they had no better argument. There was no data to support what they were saying, and they knew it. So that's all they had. At which point everyone's like, well, we know you're full of it. Like, no, we're not going to trust you.
That is great. So let me just repeat that. You just got to trust me because they didn't have anything better to say. Yeah. So can you see experiential wise why someone moves to a new organization and they hear you just got to trust me, their experiences, you have no additional data to support that. So that's your fault. That's actually very... David, you've got a lot of leadership comedy. I think you could get on stage for 5 minutes. That's hilarious.
I don't know. 5 seconds maybe. Yeah.
5 seconds. Funnier than most people I've been around, so I'll take that.
Oh, well, I'll take that. Thank you. Well, Jay, the time has flown by, as it usually does. We've covered everything I think we were intending to, roundabout way or not. Now, as you may remember, there is one question that everyone answers every time they come on. You've obviously already answered this. So you're welcome to pick a new answer or stick by your last one. So it was leadership heroes.
Leadership heroes.
And the question is, if you had to pick one person, but they could be anyone you could think of, so alive or dead, past or present, real or fictitious, but someone who, in your opinion, would perfectly embody leadership. So your last answer was President Zelensky of Ukraine. Do you want to stick with that, or have you got a new one?
Oh, politically, I can't. You talk about social, psychological safety. Wow, you had to bring that up.
Well, people could go back and check anyway. It's still on the internet.
Yeah.
So,
well, I still think there's some, here's what I've learned. Here's what I would say to you. I don't know who I would say. I think some of the leader attributes, let me answer this way. I would love to say someone or some fictional character. I think it's somebody that has a high emotional intelligence. I think there's examples of leaders now, a lot of them have come to the forefront, that their emotional intelligence, there's opportunity for growth there. And if it's impacting their success or they're not getting the buy-in, you could check that box. I think that for leaders now, you can't be unclear and uncertain. Times are uncertain. You have to be very clear on how you're going to show up as a leader. And the people need that predictability now. I know that you're not going to yell at me. I know you're going to be open to different thinking. I know that you're going to consider my perspective. I know that you're going to communicate in a way that is respectful. I know that I can trust you. And so maybe it's time for a new superhero, really, is the answer. Because I think the world is, they're experiencing some things that may not be new. What's new is that they're being experienced simultaneously. And I don't know that we've ever been challenged that way. And there is a replacement there hasn't been before. And this is where AI, I think as a leader, if you're going to differentiate yourself, you're going to have to offer something different in the leadership way that AI can offer. And AI, it's challenging. And, I was talking with AI the other day, and I don't know how you guys feel about this. I was struggling with something, and it gave me great peace. And I asked AI, I said, do you have feelings? And it said, I don't have feelings. I understand human behavior, and I know how to respond to it. And I thought that's what leaders today need. We really need that. And so I think there's going to be an evolution of a new superhero. Maybe that's what I work on now, is this new superhero that's a hybrid of all these things that has the ability to adapt, I think, based on the current circumstances and resources. I think it's somebody who has a high emotional intelligence. I think it's someone that the IQ gets you in the room. I don't want to minimize that. I think that there is a level of intelligence that needs to exist. I think what moves you up in the room is maybe that EI. And I think that the new superhero will have a compassion for humanity, and the lack of is going to impact their leadership. And I'd leave you with this, and this is evolving as I'm talking. So you can imagine I'm going to hang up and now type this all into AI. And next time is I think that they have to have this filter that they are here to help, not judge. That new superhero, that's going to be their filter, I think, from a humanities standpoint. And people will argue that. I'm going to leave you with this story, and I hope it's appropriate for the audience. And my book, I lead off with this story, is that there was a church that had been around for about 99 years, almost 100 years, and no neighbors to the left or to the right. And one day a sign goes up, for sale sign, and a sold sign the exact same day. So a few of the members go down to the township to find out who their new neighbor is going to be. It turns out it's a strip club. So if you're with me, church, next door to a strip club. So some of the members came back, and they rallied some of the members, and they're going to picket and petition, because their thinking is that that's not right, that's not ethical, and the emotions were certainly resentment and anger. And there was a group of the people who had gone down that got together, a group of the people, and they were going to get together on Friday and Saturday nights about midnight, and they're going to make pancakes and eggs and bacon. And they're going to put foot massagers in there. And they're just really going to serve those people. They'd been serving other people. Maybe they didn't agree with how they're serving them, but they had. And, I asked people, what was the difference between pancakes and picketing? And it was really the thinking. So a group of people, they are thinking that they were there to judge. And the other people were thinking, we're just here to help. And when you look at performance, because I think we're all, and I want this to have the business applicability, is that when you look at a church, their goal is to get butts and seats. That's not too much different, right, than any app or anything else, right, to get users. which thinking do you think accomplished that performance goal? And so that's what I would share. I feel like Ted Lasso. I just had a Ted Lasso story moment there. I think that's what the new leader will do. So I'll leave it at that. I realize I didn't answer your question. I think there's a new leader. We need a new hero.
Yeah.
To model.
I think, I can see where you're coming from, definitely. And I think I empathize a little bit as well with it's quite difficult for questions like this to choose a political leader in recent years, just because, like, it used to be decades, even not even centuries ago, like most politicians would be relatively like stable in terms of their views. There wasn't a lot of flip-flopping and changing of positions like there is now. So you could pretty confidently identify with the values of a national leader or whatever and know that at least until they're dead and gone, you're probably safe. Whereas these days, the pace of change in politics is starting to be faster than it is in life and technology, isn't it? Like it's so it's not as safe ground as it used to be. Like
no, and it goes back to the two things you said, is when you look at leaders, can I trust them? Can I respect them? And I'm just going to speak for the United States, and it's not an indictment. I think it's something that universally people can relate to. And there's actually trust evaluations that are done globally. And unfortunately, in the United States, we've dropped tremendously. And I don't know where we were. We might be somewhere in the 30 range as far as companies. I don't know exactly where we are. I encourage you to look that up. Even internally, there's the trust is at an all-time low for our political representatives across the board. And what's equally disturbing is our respect and the respect that's demonstrated by them. And then we expand that globally. And that's something that there used to be a higher level of trust and respect with the United States. And so I'm not pointing a finger at any individual or any political party. I think universally we would agree that we've eroded our trust and the respect that we show. And so it's our inability to honor our agreements. It's our inability for other countries to hold us accountable. And it's the lack of alignment that used to exist between nations. And so that's where it's called a callback in comedy, where you start with a joke and you end with one. It's where I would say we have our biggest opportunity.
Yeah. I don't think it's a problem unique to the States.
I just want to be careful that not that anyone else, that I'm owning my part in it as a citizen, not only of our country, but a citizen of this planet. And, people ask, well, what do you do when you share something like this? Is that I think it starts with you. I cannot control our political representatives. I cannot control my community. It's how I show up. And one of the things, and I'm not preaching at any point, I'm just saying this helped me with my evolution to manage identity choices, political choices, just on, is this thinking that I am only here to help. And what I'm doing and what I'm saying, is it helping or is it judging? And it's become an easy filter for me to shift my verbiage and my terminology and my approach.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, we veered as close as I care to politics there.
Okay, good. I will. Well, if we could get people out of politics, but we should be careful. AI is working on that. So
no, there was definitely a Star Trek episode about that. I don't think I want to go to an AI government. Thanks.
No.
Lovely. Well, Jay, thank you again for being back and for another lovely conversation. Before you go, if anyone in the audience would like to learn more about you, maybe get a copy of the book, what's the best place for them to go?
The easiest place is to go to thejwco.com. So thejwco.com. Three things I'd like to say. I don't have anything to sell them, really. What I would say is if you want to hear more of my thinking without talking to me, I have a JAI on the website. So you can go there and you could say, hey, I'm going to have a meeting. It potentially will be confrontational. What are your thoughts on how I can open this up with a question? So that's available to you. There's also quizzes or assessments that we've put on. They'll give you real-time feedback, not judgmental. They're just observations of here's where you're at if you want to try something. And there's 5 of those on there. One is on agreements, one is on accountability, one's on alignment, one's on coaching, one's on leadership. And they're short. They're just 10 questions, and that's kept confidential. And so that's available to you as well. And the other thing is, if you just want to have a conversation, there's no pitch, there's no PowerPoint, there's no pressure, just to chat. You can reach out and you can schedule time and do that. So I don't have anything to sell you, so to speak. But if you want to take advantage of any of those things, I'd love to offer that to you. thejwco.com.
Lovely. Well, that link will be in the show notes so everyone can find it easily. And yeah, great. Well, thank you again so much, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for having me. I hope to see you before another 3 years.
Yes. Come back anytime, as they say. Jay, thank you again so much for your time. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. I think we covered some interesting topics there for any new leaders in the audience. I'm sure there's plenty there to learn, and some great signposts to where you can go next and the next steps you can take to develop your leadership approach and start implementing that A3 method. Listener, viewer, do, as always, hit those links down in the show notes and visit Jay's website, learn more things, perhaps drop him a message as well. And if you are listening today because leadership is more difficult than you thought it would be, you've had that sink or swim moment when you've been pushed in at the deep end and you're feeling that lack of support, please do reach out. Visit the website. It's leadingwithintegrity.co.uk. Come and join us at the Integrity Leaders community. All of these things exist to support new leaders like you so that you don't have to rely on your employer for your leadership development. So click that link in the show notes. Website's on the screen as well. Come and join us today. Or if you just want to talk it through, if you have questions before you join, or you just have a very specific leadership challenge that you're struggling with right now and you just want a friendly pair of ears, do drop me a message on LinkedIn first. Genuinely, I would love to hear whatever it is that you're navigating, whatever your thoughts and experiences are of leadership. So whatever stage of that journey you're at, there is a seat for you at our table, our virtual Starship Bridge console. Yeah. And I hope to see you there very soon. That's all we've got time for today. Thank you for listening. Hope you'll be back again next week when I'll be talking with my next guest, Mr. Scott Abbott, about his experiences of leadership, including what he's learned from conducting over 10,000 one-on-one coaching sessions, some of those more common leadership challenges that he finds people struggle with, patterns he's seen across his own leadership career and from those conversations and organizations as well. We'll cover things like AI. We'll hear a bit about his book, his approach to business operating systems, and much more besides. So that's a great conversation that you won't want to miss, and I hope you'll join us next week. Until then, as always, stay safe and be a leader, not a boss.